Now, in this lesson, we are going to consider the SQL string functions and operators. Now, PostgreSQL also provides a variety of string functions and operators, which allows us to edit, which also allows us to combine and alter text data in columns. Now, for us to probably use the string functions to say, we need to look at the documentations. As a developer or a data analyst or SQL developer to say now, most of the problems or challenges you'll be coming across, you will need the proper official documentations to work with this, because it's obvious that you cannot get all the queries, all these formulas or functions to say, cannot commit all of them into your memory. That's why using documentations is very, very important. Now we have the official page for the PostgreSQL documentation, and the link will be provided in this lecture. The URL is postgresql.org/doc/the version/functions strings.html. And you can use these navigations to go about to navigate around the supported versions of this documentation. Now, when using strings, because in our data, you'll be coming across strings. For example, you may want to join your two columns together, which contain string. For example, we have a column containing the first name and the last name, and you may want to create another column containing their full name. Therefore, you will need to work with strings, and you have to apply string functions by joining these two columns together to produce a full name column. And possibly you may also want to create some custom email address, which you may want to combine their first name or their initials, getting this data from or values from their first name and last name, and then using the at maybe gmail.com or any other domain registrar or email services to say. So this basically, the functions to say string function and operators helps us to work with text. To say strings, you can just give it, string is the same thing as text to say. Now, I'm going to head over to the PG admin now, and so that we start working with our data. All right, first and foremost, we will be using the DVT rentals database as we already have here. And now, in our DVT rentals database, let's first of all select the whole column from, let's use the customer. If you happen to execute this query, we have here the first name and the last name, email address, and every other details to say. And if you look at our documentation here, we have, for example, let's say we want to convert certain column values or string into lowercase, right, or into uppercase. We have some of the functions here. All right, these are the functions we have here to lowercase. So if you have a column containing all capitals, you can use the lower function here to turn all of them to lowercase. Also, you can also apply the uppercase. Let's take, for example, that I basically want to select the first name, all right, and then I want to get the uppercase of the last name, all right, or the last name from our customer table. Now, when we execute this query, this is what we are going to get, where we have here upper in our last name. Now you can also apply the alias by using the last name, all right, last name here, and you run your query, it gives us the last name. Also, we have what is called the length function used in as a string function. Now, let's say you want to apply the length function. The length function gives us the total number of the numbers we have here in the text. For example, we have Jared here, Jared. So it's going to give us 5 if you apply the length function. So let's check that out. The length function of the first name, All right, so let's give it as length from customer. Now, if you run this query, it's going to give us the length of all the strings available in that column. You can also apply that to several columns. Let's say you want to apply the length function to as many columns as possible. For example, let's say last name here. If you run this query, we're also going to get the length of our string values in the columns. So you can also decide to select, all right, so that we see what is going on. Select the first name and also select the last name from here, all right. If you run this query, this is what you are going to get. So if you count Mary, Mary is giving us 4 here. If you count Smith, Smith is giving us 5. Patricia is 8 characters. And then Johnson, we have 7 characters. Okay, then another important one we basically have is a concatenate. All right, the concatenate helps us to join two strings together. We have the string concatenation. For example, if we have the value here, post, then you use this to sign here, all right, and then GraysQL is going to concatenate these two strings together. Basically, what we are saying in essence is this. Let's take, for example, we want to select the first name, last name, and then we want to create another column here to show the full name of these customers here. You can use the concatenate symbol, which we use this first name, all right? Then you use this to sign, then last name. So it basically is going to concatenate that, and then we can give it a column name here, calling it full name. Now, if you run this query, this is what you are going to get. And if you notice something, there are no spaces between the first name and the last name. And for us to solve this, we need to give a space here and then apply this. You have to write that. Okay, then you run the query again. And basically what we just did now is that we created a space. So we are concatenating the first column, concatenating it with a space here, and then concatenating it with the last name to give us the full name here. So we've basically created a full name by using the concatenate function with our first name and with our last name. Now, let's also say we may possibly want to create email address, all right, by combining our first name and last name, by creating maybe custom email address. Now, you can as well say, using a comma here, and basically what you need to do is just to copy this down. You can copy this down, but in this case, we do not need this gap. We don't need a space. We just need a combination of those two names. Then we concatenate it with a string, giving it at gmail.com. Let's say we want to give our whole customer to have gmail.com. All right. And basically, what you are seeing now is that this doesn't understand the PostgreSQL. Our output doesn't understand what the column is. So you can give it a name as email. All right. Email address or custom email. Let's give it custom email. All right. Custom email here. Now, when you run this query, we are going to get our custom email address. And now, if you notice, we have capital letters here, the Jared, ELY. And if you basically want to lower this down, you then need to apply the lower function or the string function called lower to our first name and also to the last name here. Okay, basically, you can do this. All right. Then you apply the same lower here to the last name. All right. So when you run this query, the lower string function lowers down the text. All right. And basically what we just did now is that we were able to combine the first and the last name to create our full name column and also combined it to create our custom email addresses. So you can head over to the functions documentations like string functions documentations and operators to check other ways of working with our strings in SQL. We have a whole lot of them. So head over to your documentation and get started with working with them, with a lot of functions to say here. So I thank you so much, and I'll be seeing you in our next lecture.